Welcome back to the channel. In this video, we're going to be looking at the entire process on how we produce and shot a roundtable series for Sportsnet. One of our regular clients is Sportsnet, and we have developed a relationship over the past 2 years where we have shot commercials, event coverage, as well as some one-off content pieces like this project. This project was very last minute, where we were contacted about producing a roundtable 4-video series that needed to air in the span of 2 weeks. When I say the timing was crazy, this was one of the tightest deadlines we've had as a production company so far. We were told about the project on a Friday, awarded the project the following Monday, and it needed to be shooting that Thursday due to talent's availability. As soon as we are awarded any project, we like to have an internal conversation on who is taking on what roles. As the majority of us were on other projects and I just finished a recent one, I had time to take on the role of a line producer, production manager, and the DOP. I do not recommend taking on this many roles because it is actually ridiculous. But we all came from that one-man band videographer lifestyle, so this kind of transferred over into these content pieces that we have to do. And another big factor that we didn't outsource for these roles was simply timing and budget. Now that you have context of what this project is about, the next thing that we're going to look at is pre-production. The creative and main concept for this project was having good food and conversations with good company. As this was a Black History Month project, the talent as well as the conversation topics were selected by the client. What we had to do on our side is execute as well as add some creativity. The aesthetic that we were aiming for was a barbershop or roundtable conversation piece. This is done in a lot of celebrity content pieces where they're having conversations about topics over some sort of activity. In our case, the activity is food, so a dinner scene was the most fitting. The location was sorted by client and it ended up being the top floor of a suit shop, where we had access to a fully functional kitchen as well as a lounge area. 2 days before production, we did a location scout to see if we could make the location work. Whenever we do a location scout, we like to bring a small camera with a zoom lens so we can actually shoot the project and lay out our camera positions. And the main takeaways from this scout are as follows: seating position of the talent, camera locations and focal lengths, amount of blackout material needed to block the windows, camera support needed, power locations as well as the loading in area, any set deck needed to fit the mood of the creative, and a general idea how we can light the space. There are a lot of topics we could dive into looking at the scout, but the main things I want to talk about were lighting and decorating the space, given that we were going for a dinner time vibe and we were going to be shooting this at the middle of the day. We love to hire art department for each of our sets, but unfortunately for this, it wasn't in the budget or timeline, so we had to take it on ourselves. From the location scout, we knew we had to block out the windows in an aesthetically pleasing way without making any marks on the walls. To achieve this, we used command strip hooks, curtain rod, as well as some blackout curtains. To make this scene a little bit more inviting, we added some practical light sources such as a set of floor lamps, as well as a small set of LED lamps to put on the bookshelf. And that lamp is right here. We bought a set of 3 of them. You can control it via the top as well as this little remote. And it was just something that we got off Amazon that it worked for us. In addition to these lamps and curtains, we also purchased a dining set as well as napkins to dress the table properly. At this point, we had a fairly good understanding of how we were going to execute the project, so we made a list of gear that we needed to rent in terms of lenses, camera support, as well as additional cameras. In terms of the crew, we ran this pretty light, as everyone would be taking on multiple roles on the day of production. We reached out to a gaffer, audio tech, key grip, hair and makeup, as we had a female talent, a first AC, as well as a PA. Now, there are multiple things happening at once at this point because the timeline is so tight, but during this whole process, I'm having conversations with the client so I can get the information about who the talent we're working with. And that's why I found out that we needed a hair and makeup artist because we're going to have a female talent on set. With that information, a call sheet would be made for the crew members, talent, as well as the on-set chef that would be preparing the food. As this was a piece that wouldn't be simply talking, we needed additional footage for an intro to the series. This was done in terms of forms of shooting casual conversations in slow motion, walk-ins, portraits of talent, and B-roll of the food. With all that information, we can properly schedule out the day of production, and that's the next thing that we're going to be looking at. The day of production, we immediately loaded in and staged all of our equipment where we knew no one was going to be, as well as not getting in the way of any of the cameras. Generally, with any production, art department goes in and decorates the space initially, and the lighting team follows or closely works with them. In this case, this was done simultaneously to save time. The windows were blacked out and fake curtains were added. Lighting fixtures were assembled with multiple B7C bulbs so we could adjust levels. and small LED fixtures were placed on the bookshelf to add some motivating light. With all the set decks set up and we have some motivating light sources, the next thing that we're going to be moving into is the lighting. And this was a pretty difficult one to light because we're lighting 4 subjects instead of 1. Generally, with these styles of talking pieces, a top lit source is used and usually boomed out over the talent. Luckily, there was a hanging light fixture that I knew that we could attach 2 Titan tubes to use as our main key source. As this was pretty close to the talent, we used some diffusion paper to soften it up a bit. The next thing was adding some separation to the talent in the form of a hair light, so we used 2 Titan tubes on the top of the bookshelves to achieve this. As these were hair lights, these 2 tubes had snap grids on them to control the spill. Lastly, we needed to splash some color into the background to raise the levels, and we simply placed 2 tubes on the couches and hid them with the framing of the talent as well as some pillows. Now, tubes are one of my favorite light sources to use when lighting interior scenes or small spaces, and the Titan tubes are especially great because we can rename each light, adjust it to any level or any color that we want, and control it all from an iPad. This is specifically useful when dialing in a setup like this because we are relatively lighting a big scene. A perfect example of this is that we needed to light the walk-ins of the scene, and we clamped a tube to the room entrance as our main key light. And that's lighting out of the way. The next thing that we're going to be looking at is the cameras and lensing and support and the methodology we went into choosing some of these things. This was a 5-camera setup, and we used 4 of our in-house cameras, which were 2 red Komodos, a Sony FX6, as well as an FX9. We rented an additional red Komodo off our key grip, and I would recommend anytime that you're running a production, ask any of the crew members if they have an additional gear that they can bring on to either save you time or money with any rental houses that you're dealing with. The lenses that we used were the ARRI Master Primes as well as an additional DZO Vespid Prime. We would love to use all the Master Primes, but we knew that the limitations of the focal lengths in the kit, so a Vespid 90mm was used in addition. I knew we had a pretty good colorist in terms of the post-production, so I wasn't really concerned about matching all these cameras as well as lens combinations. Now, the Master Primes are Super 35 lenses and the Sony cameras are full frame sensors. I knew that this was going to be a problem as we could use a longer focal length on the Sony cameras to avoid any vignetting of the lenses. We first had the talent come in and get situated, and then we shot some off-speed B-roll of them talking. We shot this on a 50mm to look like we were observing them. Then we shot a group portrait to use this as the main title card shot. In addition to that, we shot each single person as a solo portrait. This was all shot on a 25mm to give you that close and intimate feel. And then we got some walk-in shots of each of the talent to add some variety to the piece. At this point, we were ready for the main production, which was all the conversation pieces over the food. So we had the chef bring in the food, and then the conversation naturally happened, and this was running for about 30 minutes to an hour per topic. Now we have 4 people that we're going to be focusing on. So we're going to have 4 medium to tight shots of each subject. In addition to that, we're going to have a main wide dolly that's going to be carrying this piece in terms of the edit. I knew that this was going to save us because it was a pretty easy angle to switch to when looking at the post-production. It would be very jarring and not organic if we just had tights of all the subjects. We needed a master wide to really carry this piece forward and see the conversations happening between people. After that, talent was wrapped, so we shot some B-roll of the food in an empty setting to use as filler shots when the chef was talking about the food. It's really important to make sure that you plan out how things are going to be shot, because this will save you a lot of situations where you don't have a lot of time on set. If we didn't have a scheduled period just to shoot B-roll of the food, we'd have to try and get an additional camera in there to shoot food while they're eating, which would be pretty awkward. One last thing I would like to mention is when we were shooting the talking points, all the operators had headsets on. Justin, the director of the project, would communicate to each operator to who to focus on, as he had 4 of the 5 feeds set up on a production monitor. Now this is super important because it gave us a variety of angles to work with in post. It made us look like we were shooting with more than 5 cameras. At this point I could dive into the post-production of this project, but it was pretty standard in terms of multi-cam interviews as well as standard editing techniques. We are sometimes brought these projects last minute, and we wanted to show you our process into achieving a final project such as this one in such a tight timeline. When it comes to Tenfold, we like to focus on commercial work, but this is the reality of running a production company where you're going to get work like this with tight deadlines. We wanted to showcase on how this production was done in terms of looking at the pre-production as well as the production process and seeing the final product, but also see how we elevate the visuals when it comes to any content pieces like this. If you're enjoying these breakdowns and want to see something specific, let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching and subscribe for more.